More scrutiny coming for Harvard University's admissions policy. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen from the New York Times. The headline here is Education Department opens civil rights inquiry into Harvard's legacy admissions. An inquiry into admissions preference for family of alumni and donors began after the Supreme Court's decision last month limiting affirmative action. So the TLDR here is basically, listen, you all know what happened in the Supreme Court decision that said no more affirmative action, which considers race as a class. You can consider it in individual circumstances. Harvard was part of what led to that case getting the Supreme Court, and specifically their treatment of Asians in their admissions process. And so now in the wake of that, the Education Department is saying, okay, well, if we're ruling out affirmative action, what about the incredible preferences that are given to the wealthy and specifically through the legacy admissions process? I actually did a whole monologue on this earlier this week because there's new research about exactly how much this matters in terms of the children of the very wealthy, not even the 1%, like the 0.1%, what a massive boost they get into admissions into top schools like Harvard and the other Ivies through the legacy process. It gave them something like an 8 times advantage over your average student. And with regard to Harvard, they have some specific numbers here, which are pretty wild. So they say Harvard gives preference to applicants who are recruited athletes, legacies, and that just, so is you are the child of someone who also went to Harvard, relatives of donors, and children of faculty and staff. As a group, they make up less than 5% of applicants, but around 30% of those who are admitted each year. And there is, because wealth has been concentrated among white people in this country for a long time, that means about 67.8% of these applicants who are admitted are white, according to court papers. So you've got a wealth privilege here that also translates into disproportionate number of white people.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. So for applicants with legacy status at schools where they are legacies, you have a 37% admissions rate for elite colleges. When they apply to a similar school where they're not a legacy, the application is 11% successful. So you have almost a 4 out of 10 chance of actually getting in if you're a legacy, and only 1 out of 10 if you aren't. Now, for non-legacy applicants, the acceptance rate at the same school is 9.5%. So you can see there's relative parity for the person who's applying to the similar school when they don't have legacy status, but it's just astronomical, really, whenever it comes to the actual legacy ones for elite colleges. And then also, as you were alluding to, I would actually point more at this about the distribution of parental income for legacy admissions. Some 29% are in the top 1% of household, 29% of legacy applicants. The 36% are in the 95th to the 99th percent. And we're not talking here just about income, we're talking about wealth. And so to be in the top 1% or the top 5% or whatever of wealth in this country is a ton of, that is millions of dollars in terms of your net worth.
So the inquiry is specifically going to look into allegations by 3 different liberal groups that Harvard's legacy admissions process discriminates against Black, Hispanic, and Asian applicants in favor of white and wealthy students who are less qualified. So that's where the race numbers come into play here, is they're saying, listen, we're being discriminated against. This is basically, and I think this is accurate, legacy admissions are basically affirmative action for rich white people. So that's what the Education Department is looking into. They go on to say in this article that their Office of Civil Rights has powerful enforcement authority that could eventually lead to a settlement with Harvard or trigger a lengthy legal battle like the one that led to the Supreme Court's decision to severely limit race-conscious admissions last month, reversing a decades-long approach that had increased chances for Black students and those from other minority groups. So that could be the end case here. You could end up with this one in front of the Supreme Court as well. And my recollection is one of the justices, it might have been Gorsuch, specifically wrote about legacy admissions, how it could potentially also be indefensible. So you may have, an interesting split on this one at the Supreme Court if it ultimately ended up there. But I think this would be a major step in the right direction.
Nuke it. This is what we need, real meritocracy. That's the whole goal of the affirmative action decision. That's great. Get rid of it. There's no reason you shouldn't. Another reason why legacies is complete BS is that, the elite status these colleges have obtained has really only happened, let's say, in the last 50 years or so. So if your grandfather was just lucky enough to be like a relatively wealthy, like Boston businessman, like why should your grandson be allowed to get into based on that person's code? It makes no sense. Or, if you were one of these like wealthy California families that went to the original Stanford School of Mines, Stanford wasn't Stanford like back then.
Yeah.
But then you're, 4th generation or something like that, again, you're literally riding on geographical luck of where your great-grandfather happened to be. So, look, I don't believe in that. I don't think America is founded that on at all. It's effectively is like an American caste system, and that's what my family and many others, wanted to escape by coming to the West. So I think it's important to get as far away from that as possible.
Yeah, and it's important to note, too, one of the interesting results that came out of the study that we covered earlier this week is that it doesn't actually make that much of a difference whether you go to one of the Ivy Leagues or the other of the 12 like elite private schools that they studied in that particular research. It doesn't make a huge difference income-wise. It makes a huge difference in terms of whether you make it into these super elite institutions. That's where the big difference shows up. And so, yeah, it really matters whether we like it or not who gets into these schools. And the fact that you have the, children of the elite who are given a huge leg up in terms of admissions, I mean, that's part of what makes it so that you do increasingly have this rigid class-based society where now we're in a situation where it's actually easier to ascend your, whatever class status you were born with in a lot of European countries than it is here. I mean, it really is a direct attack on the American dream, I would say. So.
I mean, I'm even looking here, people have talked a lot about this, specifically whenever it comes to like the Supreme Court. I mean, if you look at the current makeup, of the Supreme Court leads almost entirely to the Ivy League. They even say that even the road to a Supreme Court clerkship starts at just 3 Ivy League colleges, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. I personally know people going through this process. If you think admission to Harvard is crazy, getting a clerkship is the most wild process I have ever heard of in terms of the machinations, the crap you have to go through. I mean, it definitely pays off, don't get me wrong. You get a big fat bonus whenever you eventually leave your clerkship from a nice law firm. But again, it starts so far back, like when you're a 22-year-old. And there's just no denying that, like, when you're that young, you ain't getting there on merit. You're getting there based on what your parents are.
Who they know, who you know.
Who you know, yeah, exactly. And it all comes to the dinners, and even when you get there, like, you got to have some serious cash because you have to be attending and, networking and all of these things. For every Barack Obama who was the Harvard Law Review president or whatever, there are plenty of rich kids who are all around you who end up into these positions of power. So anyway, destroying it or at least making that more equitable is incredibly, incredibly important, and not equitable just in the DEI way that they use that term. All right, see you guys later.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.